Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a writing coach, a manuscript editor, a novelist, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with Richard Meredith. I know him as Rick, but you have to call him Richard. Uh, Rick is an interesting guy, a world traveler. He's got a degree in wildlife and marine biology, and yet with that kind of background, he's been able to write some incredible thrillers. And so we're going to talk to him about that now. Rick, welcome.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be here and good to see you again. It's been a
Good to
while.
see
What?
you. It has. We met at Killer Nashville in Nashville, where else,
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. Had a great conversation with your wife, who spoke very highly of you because you were sitting right next to her, and you happened to win the Killer Nashville's Silver Falchion Award that year.
Thank you.
So, and then I've had a chance to work with you as well. We saw each other at Left Coast Crime in Tucson recently,
Yeah.
and we'll probably be together at a few more conferences now. That seems to happen a lot.
Let's
So
hope so.
tell it what here's my question. I want to talk about your books, but before we do that, um, you have a scientific background, and scientists, I don't know, for good or ill, have a reputation for, I don't know, not necessarily being in touch with their emotions, and of
That's true.
course, fiction writing. I mean, that's show and tell. And if
Yeah.
you write thrillers, action, adventure, so there's a lot of friction and conflict in there. So I'm thinking that it must have been a challenge to make that transition from, left brain, just the facts, to something that involves the whole person. So am I onto something? Was that a challenge for you?
It was writing fiction was a relief because I was writing my whole life, but it was always, very technical studies and no emotion. It had to be, third person, very objective. You couldn't, there was no personality in it at all. So when I got a chance to write fiction, there was no footnotes, no references. I could create my own world and I didn't have to worry about, you know, truth telling. It was fiction.
Right. So let's talk about some of your books. Your first one was Skydance. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to read that one, but this was your first outing in writing. And tell us a little bit about it, and how your writing has evolved over time.
Well, this one was came with everything but training wheels because I had to, I had to learn everything with this book. I went through about three or four different editors, and I published it through CreateSpace, Amazon. It was self-published back then,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's when I learned that I wasn't a writer so much as a rewriter because I went through so many iterations until I had something that I thought was. And that was really that was a steep learning curve on that, and I think it came out okay. But when I go back and read it now, I kind of some chapters you cringe, other ones you say, well, that's not too bad, but for a beginner. But
Uh-huh.
that was really that was the start.
Okay. And it's about, tell
Well,
us what the novel's about.
yeah, it's about a group of bird watchers that go down to the Amazon, on an expedition to see all these exotic birds and float the rivers down there, and they get kidnapped by this FARC-like group. And they think they're being kidnapped for ransom, hostage ransom situation, where in fact that they're actually kidnapped because they saw something that they shouldn't have seen, but they didn't know they saw it nor what it was. And so it's a story about what they saw and what the FARC and the other people didn't want them to see. And it's a high adventure how they escape from the terrorists.
Okay. And book two was, if I'm not mistaken, Crow's Nest. Am I right?
The Crow's Nest, right, right. Now
Okay.
that
Tell
was
us about
based
that.
on an article I read about these cartels that were building their own homemade mini submarines to transport cocaine from South America to California or to Mexico, and uh, and I looked at some of they captured several of those submarines and they were so primitive. I couldn't even imagine doing a 3-week trip, in one of these boats with two people and all this cocaine. And a diesel engine and then having to submerge for periods of time. And so I thought, boy, that could make an interesting story. So then I interwove that with my experience on the high seas tuna boats I was on. That kind of enters into the story. So
Hmm.
had a
Hmm.
little bit of that in there, but it's basically about how this one fellow on the tuna boat survives the sinking of the tuna boat, and you know chases after the cartel actually. So it's a chase on chase type thing.
Okay. And then your most recent novel is, I'm going to see if I can
Maskarovka,
pronounce, Maskarovka.
right?
And this is fascinating because tell us what that means.
Well, it's a loose translation for how the Russians during World War II did their deception of the enemy, and so I just kind of adopted it to how they're doing their collusion and their you know their work right now. They're uh, yeah, collusion right now,
Right.
and
Well, exactly. It's
compromat. Yeah,
I was going to say, I mean, what they were doing in World War II still holds true even today, right?
right.
In what way today?
Well, it's really about how the intelligence agency, the SVR, infiltrates an American institution to subvert, in order to subvert the U.S. Energy production, because they want to maintain their stranglehold on the European energy market. And the problem is, we had this huge renaissance in our petroleum industry, 10 years ago, and started producing more and more and more. They saw that as an existential threat to their economy because they depend, 70% of their income is based on their export of their petroleum. So they had to. So in the story, there's a bill before Congress to increase our exports of oil and natural gas to Europe, and they're going to try anything they can to stop that bill. And if it means, you know, a few, tightening, you know, if it means a few deaths here and there, and paying off a few people, and messing with our elections, that's what they're going to do.
So there's still, so in this, the allegation that Russia is planting disinformation within US social media, that's for real, right?
And that is for real. In fact, that's how I got the idea for the story. Because I started this back in 2015, before Russian collusion was on anybody's lips, and before anyone even thought about a land war with Ukraine. And there were a couple of articles. In fact, I got a couple of them here. One was the New York Times in December of 2014 about how the Russian money suspected behind fracking protests. This was, whoops, I can't be there. Another one about how Putin is funding green groups to discredit natural gas fracking, and how U.S. firms funded by U.S. green groups is tied to Russian-owned oil companies. So there's that one is from Free Beacon. Then one from McClatchy about how Russian trolls the election, post-election, disrupt energy pipeline production in the U.S. So yeah, they're busy all the time trying to subvert our economy in any way they can.
And forgive me, because obviously this is not a rehearsed conversation, and I'm going to sort of put you on the spot. And if this is something you're not equipped, to really get into, that's fine. But this is one of those things where a lot of the extreme right and even members of Congress seem to be pretty sympathetic to what Russia's doing. Is that your perception?
Well, I don't get into the politics of it that much. I think it's more of, for me, it's more of, I think the far left and the far right, they kind of meet at a certain spot,
This is true.
you know,
Same tactics.
same tactics. And I think I don't know if they have want the same result, but I think for the vast majority, they want to see a strong U.S. government and a strong economy, and they don't want interference by any foreign nations.
Right.
Yeah.
We invite people to add to the chat, and you've got a lot of fans who are watching live now. And let me just put this up. This is Andy Russick, who says, I have not been able to sleep soundly through the night since I read Crow's Nest. Being a neighbor of Rick Meredith's, I have since wondered how he knows so much about Mexican drug cartels, weapons, and explosives. So explain yourself, sir.
I found this thing called the interweb. No, I read a lot.
But you've also been, over there to a
I've
certain
been to those
extent, right?
places. I've been to some of the locales, but I haven't been involved with the cartels.
Oh, well, good. It's good to know. The FBI hasn't paid you a visit based on your
No,
interweb search, correct?
no.
But you're probably on their radar, let's just
I'm
say.
thinking after this, I will be, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the business for a minute, because I teach a lot of writing classes. A lot of my clients and students are interested in getting published, and publishing has evolved and expanded tremendously since I first started out. And it's no longer necessary to have an agent. It is if you want to get published by a big publishing house.
Yeah.
But even some of these, smaller indie companies allow queries over the transom without an agent as well. So getting published isn't the issue, but the process is still a bit fraught. So talk about, you've had an agent. So I'd like you to talk about how that went, why you're self-publishing now, and are you intending to stick with it, and what are some of the lessons you've learned in the whole self-publishing process? I have just committed a cardinal sin as an interviewer, because I've asked a multiple part question, which now gives you free rein to ignore some and go for others. But I do have follow-ups, so
Okay.
the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, as I said, Skydance was self-published through CreateSpace. But the Crow's Nest, I found a small publisher, Moonshine Cove Press in Tennessee, and they published that book. And then I went with another small. Well, then I got an agent for Maskarovka. It was under a different name. It was called Leaving Yamal. I had an agent with a big firm in big agency in New York, and we had a year-long contract. And he tried to sell it to the big publishers, but there were no takers.
Mm-hmm.
So after a year, he said he didn't think there was going to be anything happening. So then I picked it back up, and then I started marketing it to smaller or small publishers. And I went with a different publisher this time because I was looking for a publisher that was on the approved list for the Mystery Writers of America list.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why. And this Blue Water Press out of Florida has been really, really good. But the thing about it's kind of a hybrid, because even though it's published by a small publisher, I do all the marketing myself. So it's really.
You know what, though, even if you've gotten a gig with Random House or one of the bigs, you'd still have to do the marketing. And
Yes.
I don't think people understand that. Was that a surprise for you as well?
Yeah, I thought I'd just be sitting out writing all the time and I'd be done.
Boy, I'd
be discovered. That was it.
And again, now you're a scientist and not a marketer, so
Yeah.
that must have been a major learning curve.
It is a steep curve, and I'm just climbing parts of it right now. So yeah.
And so what are you learning that you wish you'd known when you first put pen to paper?
Boy, have a social media presence.
What do you mean?
I mean, have a bunch of followers on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Be known out there, and be attached to other writers so that they know who you are.
Well, do you consider yourself to be an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, it depends. It's situational. Uh-huh. At a conference like that, I become very introspective. I'm learning the how to become a stalker in the hallways, and but it's hard for me to go up to people sometimes, especially when they're big names and you put yourself. But they've always been so generous when you do meet those people at the conferences, the big
which
writers.
Then makes it easier to do the next time, right?
Right.
It's that first time where you're terrified and your fear can be paralyzing, and yet you've now been on the circuit for a bit, and I'm sensing that you're more comfortable out there. Am I
Oh
right?
yeah, there's a group of people we can talk to now, and you're comfortable with them, and they know you, and yeah. So it's yeah. That's one thing about the conferences; they really are very helpful in that respect. Not only do you learn the task and the skills of writing, but you learn how other people are doing things, and you have someone to fall back on. You got people to write you blurbs when you need it. You ask them, and they'll do it for you.
Um, Talk about how the travel experiences that you've had have influenced your writing, because writers are supposed to write what they know, and you've just had some tremendous opportunities to see the world, and that's got to inform your writing.
I it really has. I think that was really the motivating factor because although I always envisioned myself as being a writer, I always wanted to do that. I always thought, it's just writers have to be suffering all the time. They've got to be starving up in the garret, and then I got to thinking, like some of my favorite writers, like Michael Crichton was a MD, and Tom Clancy was an insurance salesman. So they had regular lives, and they took what they had from their regular lives and put that into their stories. And that's kind of what I've done. I've realized that if I take some of my work experience and make a story around that, then I do have something to go on. So
Are you a planner, a, a seat of the pantser, or a plantser, a both?
I'm a hybrid. I'm a plotter. I plod through the stories.
Right.
But I'm more of a pantser. Seat of my pants. I like to write my characters into a corner and then try to get them out of it. But the longer I go on, that's why I say it takes me several iterations before the story gets going, because I've got to go back and rewrite certain sections. And
I need your advice, because I'm in that part now. I'm working on my sixth novel. I've backed my protagonist into a corner. I have no clue how I'm going to get her out of it. But you've been there. I mean, this is an approach that's new for me. I usually know who the bad guy is and how it's going to end. I don't know this time. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
what have you learned from doing that, painting your protagonist into a corner? How do you get them out?
Well, that's it's a cliffhanger for me. So I have to figure out how he got into that situation, or actually in most of my cases, it's her that's in the situation. If you
Same here.
notice that, the peril is, and it's usually the woman who's got figuring things out and how to get out of it. And yeah, it's just it's situational. It depends on which one they're in, but uh, it's like once they're trapped in a submarine, how are they going to get out of the submarine when they're out at sea? Da, 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 da.
Yes, yes, sir. But you're still describing the problem, not the solution.
The solution? I don't know the solution. It magic happens, I guess.
Oh, it's magic. Got it. Okay. But you know what? I think you really are onto something. I teach a class called The Spooky Power of the Subconscious, because there is something mysterious, I think, about the process. And I believe it does come from our subconscious. Do you
Yeah,
believe that too?
I do. I do. I think it's because you're all of a sudden you're writing it, you're in a zone, and it's coming. If you, as I tell people, I says writing is the hardest thing to start, the easiest thing to quit, but in between, it's sure a lot of fun because there's all this stuff is banging around in your head. So
That's great. That's really well said. Um, so I have on the screen that you're working on your fourth novel, The Double Cross of Bridget,
right.
and it's now being reviewed by beta readers. I had a chance to see an earlier draft of it, and diving. Your experience as a working with divers is part of that. Talk about beta readers and finding people who will explain what a beta reader is and how that's worked for you.
A beta reader is basically someone you can hand your manuscript to and trust that they're going to tell you the truth. I mean, you can give it to your sister and she's, oh, it's the most wonderful thing I've ever read.
Right.
And well, thanks, but really, I don't think my sister would do that. I think she'd be brutally honest. But I have a sister-in-law that reads my stuff over, and she is so good. And they and I was in a couple of critique groups, and I consider them beta readers also. And if it's there are 3 or 4 chapters, and I kind of get the eye roll from 2 or 3 of them. I said, well, something's not right here. So
Mm-hmm.
no, I rely on them a lot because I think and they come from different genres too. So, they're not just thriller writers. And I trust them, and they tell me when something's bad. And you can't be thin-skinned because they're only doing it to make the manuscript better.
Exactly. Do you have a feeling about writing critique groups? I've heard mixed feelings on that from people.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I think I'd keep it smaller, and I'd keep it in genre, because sometimes the one I was in, we had a sci-fi writer, and which was really, she was a great writer, and some other people, and sometimes it was genres that weren't, a romance wasn't my thing, but I still got I had great reads, and I think I gave great critiques to their work, and they gave great critiques to mine. But I'd like to keep it in genre, more or less.
Okay. And tell me what you're working on now.
Well, I've got a new book. I'm calling it tentatively Novel 5.
Right. Really clever there.
Yeah, I know.
You're a writer, right?
No, the title is eluding me so far, but it's again the same. It's Steve Wynn, the detective in San Francisco, and his exploits now are a container ship pulls into San Francisco Bay, and in the middle of the night, and one of the containers topples off and into the depths of the bay, and come to find out it's got a payload of fentanyl and dead people.
Ooh.
And how that happened is the story. And it's got bikers, it's got all kinds of gangs. It's got street gangs in Oakland, it's got bikers, it's got tongs in Chinatown. So it's everybody against everybody. It's a free for all.
Oh, my goodness. And so you have your website is richardwmeredith.com. And I'm sure people will be able to get a good look at the books that you've written and get a better sense of who you are. And if people want to email you, you are reachable at rmeredith@comcast.net. Anything else you want to add? What am I missing here?
Well, I think that anyone that wants to write should give it a shot, because I've retired, and I'm doing it. I'm not doing it full time. Let's just say I'm doing it a lot, but I'll tell you, it's something that is very entertaining, and you meet so many great folks. Like that night we met at that conference. And several people like that. And so I encourage people to write, and I encourage people to read.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we're in an era now where there's book banning and
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff. This is
But
just
I told you, like, about a month ago I finished Bluff, and I got Fake is in the queue. Your two books, or your latest books.
Thank you.
And I enjoy. And was that La Crosse, Wisconsin? Was that where you were?
I'm from La Crosse, and Bluff is set in southern Wisconsin. I've created a place called Pine Bluff, but it's based on Stoughton. But Granddad's Bluff is a prominent geological feature in La Crosse, but I've moved it through creative license to Stoughton, Wisconsin, and then changed the name. But Granddad's Bluff is definitely a part of Bluff, which also takes place in Peru along the Inca Trail as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, we got to talk about the Inca Trail sometime, because I had a great time at Machu Picchu and Cusco. We got to talk about that sometime. At another conference.
Exactly. Do you find yourself intending to do travel research?
It not necessarily, but it always kind of oozes in. We were in Budapest, and on a Danube trip, and it just somehow I had to set a scene there in one of my stories. It just had to be there, just at this bridge, And I just got off a 20-day trip to England and Wales, and boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot. There's a lot of fodder there.
And one of the things I've discovered is that often when I write a novel, I'm writing about a place, or I'm setting it in a place I used to live.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, an interesting thing about memory and subconscious again, I suppose.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, you and I could go on for a long time.
Yeah.
Um,
We
and we will. I'm going to
and
see
we
you
will.
on the circuit. We've been talking to Richard Meredith, who's an award-winning novelist. He's won the Silver Falchion Award, and he's working on number 5. Rick, thanks very much for taking the time to talk with me.
John, thank you very much, and it's so good to see you, and I will see you again in within a month or so, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you now.